Hey, so good morning. I'm here today talking to Bekka Prideaux, who is a leadership development expert, specializes in working with technical freelancers. So, yeah, good morning, Bekka.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. It's good to be here.
No worries, great to have you here. So, I think we're going to talk about a few different topics here, um, including the obvious ones that everyone's talking about at the moment. But to start things off, do you want to give people a little bit of information about your background, where you've got to in your career and what's led you there?
Well, it's been quite a long career. I trained originally as a speech therapist working in the NHS, which gave me a great grounding in working with people from really different backgrounds and helping them to communicate more effectively, which is a large part of leadership. I then went into working for an SME. They were the people who make the weird shaped bits of plastic and metal that hold your flat pack furniture together. So I just need to apologise for all the frustration that we may have caused with them in the past. But it
Nice.
gave me a really good all round business experience because I got to work in most departments and understand what was happening and what really drives a business growth and what really drives a small business. I kind of fell into a HR role eventually there, working with developing the team and developing the people. And when I kind of outgrew the company a little bit and wanted a bigger challenge, and the time was right for that business to move its manufacturing plant outside the UK, I then went to work for Cadbury Schweppes, where I worked on a large number of IT projects as a change specialist and as a HR specialist, did quite a lot of organisation
Mm.
development work, ran the Cadbury Schweppes coaching development program, so ran a team of coaches and taught people to coach as part of their leadership role, and worked with a couple of the more technical functions to really get them working effectively in the business. Then it was probably about 12, 13, maybe 14 years ago now. Cadbury and Schweppes went their separate ways, and obviously the need for a head office function, which is where I was based, went away. I'd always wanted to work for myself so I could pick and choose the assignments I did and do more of the ones that I find fun. So, despite the fact we were in the middle of a recession, the
Yeah.
timing seemed right. And I've been working for myself, freelancing and contracting, and running a team of coaches now ever since. So, I've been doing this a way rather longer than I care to admit.
Cool. No, that's fantastic. They're really, really interesting. And so, yeah, obviously you work contracts and freelance as well as, like myself, work with other contractors and freelancers as well. Do you want to kind of describe a little bit about that kind of work that you do?
Well, I think it's really important if you're setting out to help other freelancers that you know what it's really like in the freelance world and you've kind of got that lived experience as well as the maybe intellectual experience of what growing a business is like. And personally, I love the variety. I love helping freelancers understand where they've got stuck in their business and to get them back to why they started freelancing in the first place. Most of us start because we want the flexibility, the freedom, maybe the freedom financially or the
Yeah.
freedom time wise. But somehow a number of us end up just effectively working for a different boss every month and not having any of that control that we wanted. And there are ways you can claim back your business, and I love helping people do that and seeing the difference it makes for them. But I also love working for my corporate clients and working in the more specialist sort of organization effectiveness and change management pieces that I do. And I get a real kick out of helping leaders there as well. And I think quite often in a career position, what happens is you get really good at what you do, and if you don't decide to go freelance and you decide to go corporate, you get put into a management role, and all of a sudden you're dealing with and being measured by a whole set of things you've got no experience of, and nobody's there to help you. And again, I believe if I
Yeah.
can work with leaders at that point in their career, the ripple effect is huge. It impacts not just them then and their team, but all the teams they interact with later on. And suddenly the people in their teams who become managers have had a good role model. And I think, it's a way of having a really high impact with people and making their working worlds work for them, because at the end of the day, that's really important to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of, freelance work, then I know you kind of mentioned the love of being able to deliver good work for the right kind of clients for you. I think, firstly,
Mhm.
many freelancers and contractors certainly struggle to identify what that looks like. They'll know when they are almost like having a good experience with a particular client, but won't necessarily be able to attribute that to the way that that engagement has come about, the way that that engagement has been managed. Is that something you see as well with freelancers, kind of lacking, some of those business skills, perhaps, and business kind of consciousness, if you like?
I think so, absolutely. I think we go into freelancing generally because we're really good at that specialist thing that we do, and we see the opportunities to make a difference in different places and to work in a way that works for us. But there is a knowledge gap around. So, what does that mean from a business perspective, and how do I structure it? And there's also a piece around what have I learned along the way, and how can I figure those things out? How can I use what's happened in the past and pull the lessons and then reapply them? In the same way that if you fail and you keep doing the same things, you'll keep failing. If we can identify what makes a good contract for you and do more of those things that are good, then we can move forward. And we're often too close to it
Yeah,
personally. We need somebody to challenge our thinking and to help us pull that information out. And that's broadly what a coach can do.
yeah, no, absolutely. I think, yeah, that perspective is definitely helpful. Something I see as well with some, not all contractors and freelancers, is actually almost not having the confidence to present themselves as their business, and fall into the trap of acting quite like an employee, because they're almost so keen to please the client. They think the way to do that is to act like an employee, and be the best employee, even though they're not an employee, that they can be, rather than actually having that awareness of, actually, as a business, this is what I do best, and having the confidence to stand behind that almost.
Absolutely, and I think it's very understandable, particularly when you start out. You hear about, and you may well experience the kind of the feast and famine, where you get a contract and everything's great, and then I haven't got a contract. What happens? And so that need to
Yeah,
please and that need to provide what you perceive as great customer service or label as great customer service, i.e., I'll do whatever you want and I'll jump as high as you
yeah,
say, as opposed to providing that extra value of challenging and really staying in your specialism and maybe introducing other people if there's another need. It's really high. It's a very natural human emotion, and that step into actually this is me, this is what I do best is challenging, particularly if there are no contracts coming in the short term. But ironically, it's what makes the right contracts come. So it's a difficult balance.
yeah. It can sometimes feel scary to specialize, because then you're almost closing down doors that you perceive as being open. But in actual fact, there aren't many doors open because you're not willing to specialize and stand for something at the same time. So it can feel scary, but actually it is the only route to really being able to um, demonstrate that authority, that expertise, stand for something, and become excellent at something, and therefore charge the value that that is then worth to those clients that you love and want to work with.
Absolutely. And I think kind of that for me segues into the IR35 discussion, in that if what you love is being
Mm,
an excellent employee, then maybe freelancing's not for you, and you'd be better off on an inside fixed term contract where you're working for maybe 6 months, a year for somebody as an employee, and everybody's really clear that's what's happening. And I think if you look at the intent behind the IR35 legislation, it was to help people be clear what their employment terms are, and to be taxed fairly across the board. And we all agree that we should be taxed fairly. But what's happening, I think, with IR35 a little bit is that because of, in the short term, it forcing people into either inside, outside, or umbrella, we're not seeing that fairness across the board. And we're seeing the good contract opportunities disappearing in the short term as freelancers. But I think they'll come back when it settles a bit. And I think we're starting to see that settling down, where I've heard 3 or 4 stories just this week, and we're on, I think, Thursday, around people in financial institutions now taking a more, what people have labelled a more sensible approach and a more pragmatic approach, having lost some really key contractors when they tried to force them inside. So it's kind of the same thing as we were talking about specialising. You have to be really clear what matters to you and where your lines are in, and what you're prepared to do and what you're not prepared to do, and being confident enough in yourself to stop when you're pushed in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I think that, for me, doing consulting work for many years now, when I started out doing contract work, I quite quickly did see there were two types of contractors: the ones that wanted to be that temporary employee, and the ones that were actually trying to build a business, get different revenue streams, etc. And I think if you're in that first category of just wanting to be that temporary employee, then recognize that for what it is and go forward on that basis and do that very, very well. But be comfortable in that's what you're
Absolutely.
doing, and be honest and transparent in terms of what you're doing. But then if you're in that other category that many are, or many are moving towards, then approach that as a business, should have clarity on the client that you want to work with, have clarity on the value that you add to those clients, and communicate to them and work with them in that way. I think it should be a positive thing to make that decision and then pursue it to the best of your ability.
Absolutely, and I think it will help everybody who wants to work in a more flexible way if we do that, because it'll be easier as individuals to describe what we're doing. And when we get used to, as business owners, forgetting the employment word in everything that we do, not working and engaging through HR, but going in through procurement as a supplier as opposed to an employee,
Yeah.
getting ourselves into the mindset of positioning what we do like that. For me, it's always a bit of a red flag if somebody asks me, can they see my CV really early on in the process? Or could I just talk to HR? A little bit more confusing because I do actually work for HR. But when they start trying to put you through a recruitment process, it's your opportunity to kind of say, that's great, you're more than welcome to see the profile of our consultants or our coaches or our whatever they are. And you can talk to them, but this isn't an employment interview. Please remember that we are suppliers and that we're talking about a supply contract. If we can move to talking to procurement rather than HR around our engagement terms, we're getting a really big win.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those conversations are not ones that people should shy away from. I think they are ones that people should embrace, because then the clients will see you operating as a supplier. Therefore, their perception of value will increase, and there will be far more, I was going to say far more willing, but I think actually they will value the working with you and your processes far more, because they're no longer having to take on the burden of working out how you fit in and everything else. They're leaning on you for your expertise, which is absolutely the thing that they should be doing, I think.
Absolutely, and I do think we have a role in helping the people we work for or work with, our clients, understand the impact of making the decision either way and what it means, and how we're helping them mitigate their risks by engaging us as suppliers. And yes, that means we'll then have to do some work with the managers and the people in the business that we work with, so they don't fall into treating us like employees as well. But if we've got the initial engagement right and the terms of that engagement right, that's much easier to do. And it's going to take a while for it to shake down. It's bound to, but I'm really convinced it will, because I think the need for deep expertise within organisations isn't going to go away. We're dealing with unprecedented levels of change generally, and businesses need to adapt, and they need that resource for a while, but they don't need the hassle of recruiting it, because actually that can take a very long time for an employee, and they don't need it long term. So engaging with a more flexible workforce, be it as fixed term contractors or as freelancers, fixed term employees or freelancers, then actually we're enabling them to meet their business needs. And at the end of the day, as suppliers, that's what we're there to do, to help them with their business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the first step, as you say, is helping them to get clarity on exactly what those needs really are, rather than jumping to the way they think the problem they think they might have gets solved. Um, so yeah, like yourself, I'm seeing more organisations open to having those discussions. But even in my consulting experience, working alongside other contractors, that there are things you can do to reinforce that as well, and even simple things like in conversation, with key personnel, at the client sites. It's things like, well, as you know, I work with many clients, and something I found that helps with this type of client in this scenario is X, Y, and Z. And you don't have to say that first, but you could just say, well, this is what I think we should do. But actually, by referencing other clients that you work with, and the value that you add by having that breadth of experience, it helps to remind them that you're very different to an employee. You bring something entirely different to that conversation.
Yeah, and I think you have as an external supplier, as an external, you have a different license in terms of how you can ask questions. I sometimes talk to
Yeah.
my clients about, I'm going to play my fool's license right now. So, this might be really obvious to you, but pretend I know nothing. And then you ask you a question, and actually quite often that gets people to the, oh yeah, moment. And actually you also have then, well, let me share some things I've seen work in other places, as you say. And do any
Yeah.
of those feel like they might be great for you? So I think you can do it, and you can do it without, certainly in my world, client confidentiality is really important. If you visit my
Yeah.
website, you'll see it's not blazoned with lots of big corporate logos. It's not because I haven't worked with the big corporates. It's because of the confidentiality agreement I've signed with them on the way in. Because if they're going to talk to me about the deep
Yeah.
problems in their business, which tends to be the kind of conversations we have, they don't want the world to know they've had big problems. Why would they? So we need to be able to
No.
work in a way that reinforces and respects our clients' wishes as well. But you can still do that and share the wisdom that you've and the lessons that you've learned along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And these are all things that you should spend time as that freelance or consultant or consultancy in understanding and recording, as you come across those things with those client interactions as well. They are all, assets for your business ultimately, things that come out of conversations like that.
Absolutely, definitely, and it's certainly something that working with leaders, I recommend they do is have a reflection or a journaling practice, whichever word sits best for them, where you just basically capture your lessons
Yeah.
learned each week, what's gone well, what would you like to do more of, what would you like to do differently, and what could you take into, what have you learned that you can take to different situations. Just to get in the habit of reflecting and reviewing, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that leads nicely into that topic of leadership, and leadership with freelancers, contractors, consultants as well. And I think that can obviously range from how you lead your client and provide leadership to your client as a supplier, but also, if you then bring on other people to assist you in delivery of work as well, in term, what leadership skills and attributes are important to make sure that that is effective as well.
Yeah, and I think it's a challenge, particularly for technical freelancers who've maybe left employment because they didn't want to manage people. So they have this bug in their head about, I can't do it, I don't want to do
Yeah.
it, usually created by what they've seen leadership and management looking like in the past. And I think the fundamental thing for any leader or new manager is to know that they're not going to get it all right the whole time, and that's okay. And to know they've got to do it in a way that works for them as well as their team, and that we can find that way. So it is slightly different for everybody, and there's no one right way. There are lots of things that you should try and
Yeah.
avoid, but there's no one right way of being a leader. It's about being really authentic and being yourself as a leader. And the way I look at it is there are kind of three sets of things that we do when we're in a management or a leadership role. We lead, which is all about setting direction. What is it we're going to do? What does it feel like to work around here? So driving the culture of your organisation. So if
Yeah.
you've got people working for you, when they go out and represent your business, you want them to represent your business in a way you're comfortable with. So that piece around what the values are, how I like to operate, what's really important to me when I work with my clients, being able to articulate those values and the direction that you want the business to go and how you want that relationship to go, really, really important. And obviously with your own, if you're working within a client, you still need that, and you're a business of one, which many people are for quite a long time.
Yeah.
You still need to know those things and what direction you're going so that you can recognize the right opportunities. You work with your clients in a way that feels really good to you. And we talked earlier about how it's got to feel right, and some contracts feel better than others. And usually
Yeah.
it's about a values match, or being clear where your values mismatches and how you're handling that, because it happens.
Yeah.
So you've got the leading, you've got the managing, which is getting stuff done, and that's usually the bit that people feel most confident about. They know their technical piece, they know how to
Yeah.
deliver. What they may need to learn a little bit more about is how to deliver through other people, and there are some kind of key skills that sit in the middle of all of these three areas. So if you think of it a bit like a Venn diagram, so far we've got two circles that overlap. And the third one is around coaching and developing people. Now, if you're working within an organization, you may be expected to do some knowledge transfer, and you are going to want to help to develop the people around you so they understand your world and they can deliver what you need them to deliver. And if you've got a
Yeah.
team, even if they're not employed by you, we all have an innate desire to learn and keep growing, and you need to keep feeding that and helping them work in a way that works for you. So there are a
Yeah.
few key super skills, if you like, that sit in the middle of that Venn diagram where it all overlaps. The most critical one for me is about how you approach conversations and approaching them with curiosity, so wanting to find out more and learning about what's going on around you, and then making choices. So my team of coaches are known as the curious choice coaches, because that's what we encourage fundamentally people to do, is to get really clear about and ask great questions and discover and learn. And as a consultant or a freelancer, you're bringing, as you say, you're bringing in knowledge from other places, and that's what that is. But there are then
Yeah.
skills like delegation, how you share work out, that are absolutely critical, that if you get that process right, they help you with your team, but they also help you with your client. Because even as a business of one, you are taking client instructions and you're delivering on them. So you're at the other end of delegation. And if you understand that process
Yeah.
and you're great at it, you can pull in the information you need from the client when you need it. But you can also get, we all need input from our clients to do what we do. It helps you get that input on time to keep you on your project timeline as well. Another one being feedback, and how you get information on what's working, what's not working, how you give feedback to the client, how you receive feedback, because we need to do that. We may not call it feedback, all become
Yeah.
really critical, and they're all sit in the overlap of that lead, manage, coach Venn diagram.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
And I've kind of, this is why it's important. I'm not sure I've answered your question, Matt, sorry.
Yeah. No, absolutely. No, I think it's good to understand what leadership is and isn't. And as you say, I think many fear the management because they have been managed, as it were, badly before and have poor experiences of managers that were not leaders and were, we've all had the micromanager, right? Probably because they lacked the skills, knowledge, and experience to actually lead people. So they kind of overcompensated, probably because of their own insecurity. So I think, when it comes to freelancers, consultants, contractors in that leadership role, either with a team that they're building or with clients, I think many shy away from it because they don't want to be the pushy micromanager, but miss a massive amount of value and opportunity, I think, if they don't actually, recognize that the leadership is different. Leadership is bigger than that, and management is only a part of it. But there is a right way, and the culture thing that you spoke about, plays into that, you know, really, really well. And the values piece that you started off talking about, that's where I start with working with clients. Even as that one person business is you've absolutely got to start with values. It's not something that you do when you get big enough to have that problem when you've got a team. It's actually something you should do from day one that's going to enable you to have that team when it's the right time for you.
Well, and it's part of, I mean, I absolutely agree. And it's been so well documented that people leave managers rather than businesses. And some people choose to freelance to avoid having to go that management career, but to grow a career.
Yeah.
So I think when we're dealing with freelancers and contractors, there's an even bigger barrier than there is internally because they've actively walked away from
Mm.
it. But I absolutely agree. If you don't start with the values and what matters to you and what difference your business is going to make, how do you know what to do? How do you make any other decision? It's kind of, for me, it's like the beacon that keeps pulling you towards it, so that you can make sure you're making good for you decisions and not kind of like, oh, this person over there said do that, I'll go off and do
Yeah.
that, which may be right for them, but it won't necessarily be right for you. And you need that foundation in why you're in business in the first place, what your parameters are. Is it around, I want to work flexible timings so that I'm always there for my family? Is it around, I'm just after the money? Whatever it is, there's no wrong answer, well, other than not having an answer.
Yes.
Because otherwise, how do you evaluate any opportunities that come along?
Exactly. I describe it as a context for decision making and a context to, help define how you
Absolutely.
interact with anyone really in the context of your business, but even outside of your business, to be honest.
Yeah. And it quite often surprises me how few people have ever stopped to think about that. And it makes me a little bit sad. So, kind of, I am on a bit of a mission to help people to figure that out because it just makes everything else so much easier in business and in life, as you say.
Absolutely. No, it definitely does. And I think that might actually be a good place to leave this conversation. I'm sure we'll have, many more in the future. There's a lot of other topics we could get into, but I think actually what I kind of seem we're coming to a conclusion here, and both saying that actually the values is where you've got to start if you want success as a freelancer consultant, no matter which path you go down. Start with the values, and that's going to help shape your understanding of the path you want to take and exactly what that will look like for you. So I think, yeah, that's a great place to leave it. And if people are watching this and want to drop comments below, I'd love for people to share their values, if they have them, or equally if they haven't taken the time to do that, then equally I'd love to hear from you as well.
Absolutely.
Cool. So yeah, thank you. Yeah, very much for your time today. I'll leave all your contact details and everything else on the post and the various places that we'll share this. And yeah, I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I look forward to another conversation again soon.